first of all, thank Joy for thinking that I deserve this honor to talk to an upcoming generation, especially on this continent where we need women, and this continent need women to take up that position and lead. Not only this continent, but the world now needs women to lead. And I challenge all of you to be very curious about reading successful women's stories, whether they're current leaders, and see how they lead. And try to lift from that story, what are the threads in that leadership style? And I'm telling that deliberately because I've spent much time in my corporate career reading books about leadership. You saw that I've done my MBAs, I've been to Harvard, I've done everything. I've been, I think, lucky enough, like women my age who have gone through this career leaps, to be exposed to some of this accelerated leadership programs. But with reflection and with age, I realized that there was a certain lens through which some of these books were written. And they were written for men, I think, in a patriarchy style leadership in the corporate world. And I think what it has left is the power of the female presence, not only in the home, but in the corporate field. So if there's anything you remember from today, if there's anything, is the power of what a woman brings into the boardroom. Because that actually is what makes the difference in this world. So you have a lot of women leaders that come into very, very senior leadership positions, but we try to mold ourselves into a patriarchal style of leadership, which is not us anyway. What we actually need to understand and to nurture further is what it is that we bring that is different. So that is my introduction to all of this. So I was just, as a plea, please read about female leaders who have changed the world, whether they're environmentalists, whether they are social injustice change makers, Nobel Prize winners, and just try to understand what it is that made them that type of leader. So that's my introduction. So once again, congratulations on Sherock. Our future looks bright with you guys, because here we are, we're being led, which is what we hope to do. And may you rock even further for more and more. So if you can just indulge me a little bit, I'm going to take the next 15 minutes just talking about two aspects. And I chose the first aspect I'm going to talk about because when I was starting my corporate career, when I decided to stop doing medicine for a little while and sort of got into the corporate world. And as Joy was saying, for a very long time, I worked in the corporate sphere as not as a doctor, but as just a leader. And it is a lesson that was so profound that I cared to share it with others. And it was profound because I didn't know that this thing exists. And some of you might have come across it. And the first part of my talk is about this four burners theory by James Clear. Does anybody know about James Clear? With a C-L-E-A-R. Please join him on Instagram. Please join him and follow him, because he does the most famous things. And so this is the first part. And he talks about the four burners theory, as in a stove. The first burner represents your family. The second burner, your friends. The third burner, your work. And the fourth burner, your health. So you put those four into a quadrant. And generally, when you Google this, and why I'm talking about this, is because I thought long and hard about what is it am I going to talk to these young leaders and entrepreneurs and mothers and wives and sisters about. A lot of people will talk about technical things like sharpen your CV, keep time and all of those things. And I said, no. For me, let me share what it is that was very different, but was most useful to me. And so that's why I'm talking about this first burner as the first part of my talk. And this first burner challenges us to find as you re-enter the work environment. Joy, it's correct that a lot of us are transitioning back into a work environment, right? Is to reflect on these and say to yourself, if these are the 4 important areas of my life, how am I going to balance them so that I remain sane in my leadership role as an entrepreneur, as all parts of me that I am in the 24 hours. And he says you have 3 options in dealing with each one of these 4. The first option is to learn to outsource. Really, guys, they call it different things, but he calls it outsourcing. So let's make an example. I was working at the UN when this, for me, made impact. I was working in Pretoria, which is a 55-minute drive from my house. I was a young mother with children in primary school, which meant I had to fly back through traffic to collect my children in time at the car park before it got dark. And this really, as you can see, just didn't work. It was not right. But what was I trying to do? I was trying to be a good professional, to be very good at work so that I'm there at time and leave the last, but also to be a good mother and a good wife and all of those things. So in this instance, with the quadrant of family, is a very good older sister said to me, who was sitting on a very big board here, said, so what are you earning your salary to do? You got to outsource some of the things so that it lightens up your load, so that you can actually be good with what it is that you did. And one of the first things I did was we hired a driver. These things look like they are spontaneous, they're not. You have to be very intentional about doing these things to understand what it is you're doing them for. So I outsourced so that then I could become available when I got home for my children, because they've been back 2-3 hours and they've done their outwork. The second thing I did was the driver also had to come up with the skills of doing homework. So they did that as well. And you pay somebody to do that. What is your salary there for? And you have to make sure that they're good. That's the second thing you do. And it just makes sense, doesn't it? But you do the same thing when you cross over to the work quadrant. One thing we try to do, the superwomen story, it's nonsensical, let me tell you, for free. Just learn to delegate and ask for help. Please do that now. Some of us learned it very late in life when the blood pressure and the diabetes entered. Learn it now. Ask for help and outsource for help. So apply the outsourcing story to all the quadrants of your life, depending on where you are. The second option you have with these 4 quadrants is what he calls embrace the constraints. You're not a superhuman. Actually, sit down and agree that in the 24/7 world, you cannot do anything. But to be good, you need to understand the concept of where you spend your time matters. So if you choose to spend time with your friends, that's fine, but you are an entrepreneur, your business needs you, right? So trade-offs are part of life. You have to do some trade-offs. You sit down for yourself, because only you know what is important. Where you spend your time matters. If you choose to ignore your partner, do understand that there will be consequences. If you ignore your children, there'll be consequences. The point about this talk is about being very clear and aware of the choices you make on this thing we call the work-life balance. There are trade-offs, and you must make intelligent decisions about that. The third option about these 4 quadrants is agree and understand that life has seasons. Even though you guys are going back to the work life, we're all at different seasons. So I can tell you, in my life, if I do my entire historical timeline, I've lived the student life, I've lived the young working life, I've lived the young mother's life, the professional life. I'm actually looking at retirement. So with all these 4 quadrants, stage where you are in life and decide what season. Certain things are more important if you're a breastfeeding mother than when your children are playing tennis and all of those things. You understand the difference? So be very intentional about planning your life, so that these are not stuff they teach you at business school. These are life things, but be very intentional so that they're not things that get thrown around. So in summary, therefore, this work-life story is for real, but it is a misnomer to think that you can spend 25%, 25%, 25% in each one of them. But agree that you sit down and allocate what it is that you're going to outsource, what is it that you're going to give to others to do in each one of them. Agree that there are constraints, but also accept that there are seasons in your life. A 60-year-old woman like me will not prioritize what it is for a 25-year-old. Are we correct? So that is the first part of my talk. I'm going to pause here because I want to get into the second part, which is my day-to-day life. If anybody has a question, I'll be very happy to take it. But if there are none, I'll move on, because this is really supposed to be a keynote. But the second part of this for me has to do with my everyday life. And I moved into this area of self-care because of where I am in life. And I think what the lives and the lessons that life has thrown at me. And I'm a very curious animal. I had Joy in her talk about, you must stay curious, you must stay ahead of your pace, you must do all of that thing. But if you trained as an engineer, watch, if COVID comes, there might be other skills that become priority, shift with the times. And that's what if you really read my full CV, you will see that I have moved out a lot. It confuses a lot of people, but I've enjoyed my life because it is agility and all of that I think has made me survive to this age. I'm still planning my next 20 years, by the way. So this next section of my talk is about what I call creating a self-care plan. Again, I will repeat, there's a lot of other things you learn about drawing up the excellent CV, time management, all the other skills you need that are technical. This stuff is what I have felt for my talk for today is important, because some of it comes out of life, some of it comes out in conversations, most of it actually comes as advice from others that have walked the path around of it. And I'm going to have, if people want, I can share this self-care plan with. And how I use it is, the first time you do it, have a look at this wheel and chart on a scale of 1 to 10 how you're doing. Some of you might have come across it. And then 6 months later, and every 6 months, or however often, as you chart your re-entry life into the work life, how you're doing. Because what it does, it makes sure that you're looking after the engine. And of the 4 quadrants, this for me is what is the circle that falls under what I call health and wellness. Because we have to pay attention to the engine that drives you being a mother, you being an entrepreneur, you being a leader, you being anything else you define yourself as. If your body is not healthy and your mind is not healthy, you will not be able to do all those excellent things you want it to be. So if I may just take the next 2 minutes, there are 8 quadrants in my self-care wellness wheel: environmental well-being, financial well-being, intellectual well-being, emotional well-being, social well-being, occupational well-being, and spiritual well-being. And finally, which most of us are familiar with, is physical well-being, which we all talk about because we go to the gym, we pay a lot of gym things and do all of that. But for most of us, all this others we don't do. So for purposes of this exercise, the person that first introduced it to me said, it is so simple, people actually don't take it seriously. But when you start doing this as a self-care plan for your mental wellness, for honing your physical ability to do your work to be excellent, is understanding fundamentally that if your body is not healthy and your mind is not relaxed, you actually will not acquire all those aspects of your life, whether it is in church, whether it is at football, whether it is being a mother, as you want. So because this is my work, this is where I spend most of the time in dealing with this. And the questions I would invite you to do at your own time. When you rate yourself around the environment within which you live, how does it support your well-being? The environment in this wheel means, are you close to an environment that is polluting, that is full of unhealthy things? And people have actually moved dwellings because it was not healthy where they were. Financial well-being, we've sort of flippantly talked about budgeting and all of that. Guys, you are young, take it seriously. Actually sit down and do your monthly budget. It affects your health. Because if you're running behind and chasing a budget you can't afford, it will affect who you are in the world. Your intellectual well-being, and I'm talking to this crowd. So I guess you have a library, you read incessantly, you're ahead of your time. Just get those brain cells going and stay alive. Because if you look at, if you have a grandmother or grandfather and they're sharp, it's because they have this continuously working mind. Your intellectual capacity keeps you going. Your emotional well-being is a skill that is absolutely a leadership skill. If you're going to lead people, yourself and others, is learning the art and skill of reacting appropriately to how the world throws emotions at you. You have to almost have an entire book about how your emotional well-being. You know those people that like, there'll be an entire tsunami going around them and they just don't change. Is they have learned the skill of what I call emotional balance. So that when somebody says something to you in the boardroom or at work or on your way to church, you make the decision how you're going to react to it. And after a while, it becomes a skill. You need that to be a successful person. Social well-being is my favorite one because it talks about that thing that we don't usually talk about. It emphasizes the social relationships we have. And those social relationships are the social relationships we have at work, with our workers, with our relatives, with our cousins. Most people actually have very toxic relationships and don't realize how badly they relate to them. If you're going to lead yourself, you need to choose which relationships will hold you. I call them crucibles. What relationships are going to socially hold you and support you in the manner in which you know people that are completely distracted by the terrible relationships they have, whether at home or in the workplace. Sit down and make decisions about what relationships matter. Your occupational well-being is work. It is how you relate to this, how work affects you, and all of this thing. It doesn't help your career move to always be stressed at work and complaining about your neighbor who drinks too much or always plays games on the computer. Be very clear also about how do you react to your work environment. Your physical well-being I started with is our gyms and our health and our food and all of those things. It's an entire lecture on how we do that, but it is important. I want to end up with my favorite one, which is our spiritual well-being. The most grounded people, even if they don't talk about it, have a very strong sense of purpose and believing in a higher being. It doesn't matter what they call it. It grounds you. You wake up at very morning with purpose. You will not know because most people don't talk about it, but I promise you, your spirituality and your practices that ground you as a person, just to be still. So this is my favorite wheel because it doesn't only look at health and well-being as your physical state and your mind, but it completely takes what I call a very comprehensive view of what well-being is. So I wanted to make a very short presentation about these two aspects, the one being the common 4 quadrants of work, life, work balance, and then what I call my comprehensive well-being wheel. And I'm very happy to to finish off by saying, I didn't want to get into the technical abilities of what to do when you're this and the 7 steps to what. But I hope that this sort of sets you to looking at your life and understand how comprehensive and massive an opportunity you have ahead of you. But I think I'm hoping that you will take it in its fullness with gratitude and a full understanding that your bodies and your minds are central to the level of the success that you're going to become. There's no point being 40 and a CEO and dying of a heart attack. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve anybody. So Joy, thank you.